Headquarters. Good morning to everybody who's watching from the field. Just a quick announcement, administrative, before we get started. For those HUD employees, you want to make sure that you get some training credit for this, so make sure that you sign in on the sign-in form that we have here. And for those HUD employees who are in the field, please send me an email now between 10 and 11 o'clock this morning during the time of the session. So let me welcome you to our monthly HUD OCIO learning session. I'm Melanie Cohen. A lot of you get emails from me very, very often announcing these sessions, so I'm really pleased to see the amount of people that we have here today. Today we're really honored to have Dr. Stan Boddie from the National Defense University. Many of you have already seen his resume and his bio, and as you can see, he has a very distinguished career, both professionally and academically. And what he's going to be talking to us today about is transformational leadership. And I certainly won't steal any thunder from him, but what I would like to say is the really important thing about transformational leadership is that you don't realize the effect one person can have and how they can help change an organization. So with that, let me introduce to you Dr. Boddie.
Thanks so much, Melanie. Everyone, I really appreciate you inviting me here. I also want to share with you that my presentations are usually upbeat and they're usually very positive. I'd like to share with you today that today's presentation is going to be more of a call to action and more of a sense of urgency. So to help us get started, and by the way, throughout the presentation, for those of you that are here physically and those of you that are over the ether, if you have any questions at all, please, Stan, what about this? Stan, I disagree with that. Stan, where's your evidence for this? So please ask. So let us start. So without looking at your neighbor, and being honest with yourself, how many of you today, by show of hands, without looking at your neighbors, how many of you today consider yourselves to be leaders? No need to look at your neighbor. Great. So this presentation is for those of you that consider yourselves to be leaders, and those of you especially who might not consider yourselves to be leaders. Could we go to the next slide, please, Melanie? Folks, we are engaged in a national struggle. Can someone tell me, by the way, has anyone attended classes at the National Defense University, I-College? Great. Marion in the back and Catrice up front. So therefore, I will not bore you with the PR things about the National Defense University. You could talk to Marion and you could talk to Catrice. So next slide, please, Melanie. So here's where we are, folks. The discussion of today for our nation is a $14 trillion debt. Can you imagine owing someone $14 trillion? And yet, just 6 blocks from where we are, folks are engaged today outside of the government at our Congress trying to figure out what to do. Everyone has all these ideas about what to do. And every single day, the debt grows higher. Could you go back to that slide, please? Actually, the previous slide, please. Thank you. The next slide, please. Thank you. There you go. So we have something called a deficit. Can someone help us understand exactly what the term deficit means? Who understands that term? I know the folks at HUD understand. Yes, I am convinced. I'm convinced, ma'am, that the folks at HUD understand the term the deficit. So who can help us get level set on what it means to have a deficit? Someone. Okay, ma'am. And your name?
Terry.
Hi, Terry. I'm Stan. How are you? So what does it mean, Terry, to have a deficit, ma'am?
That means you have more debt than revenue.
Which means we are spending more this year than we are bringing in revenue. and we are spending more to the tune of $1.5 trillion. That's the same as you spending twice as much in your home budget each month than you are bringing in. That's a great thing, isn't it, Paige? Isn't that a great thing to have that deficit, Paige? It's terrible, folks. It is absolutely horrendous. There is a national sense of urgency. Now, here's the question. Should we continue business as usual? Or perhaps should we consider strategies that can help organizations such as the Housing and Urban Development Department, such as the Department of Defense, such as the Treasury Department? Should we consider strategies that we can consider to reduce our operating costs? Because if we do not, the future is going to be very, very bleak. And everyone is saying what the Congress should do. I ride the train from Fredericksburg to Washington, D.C., and all of the geniuses that are on the train, you know those geniuses, Terry, they have all those solutions about, oh, the Congress should do this, oh, and the Congress should do that. Well, folks, I want to share some insight with you. There are 300 million Americans who are not blaming the Congress. Terry, guess who they're blaming, ma'am? You. Marion, guess who they're blaming? You. They're blaming the government employee because we are a target of opportunity. And did you all see the USA article this week? You all did not see the USA Today article this week that said in the government no one ever gets fired? I know your name, ma'am? Felicia, you saw the article, correct?
Well, it said something, the only way, probably the most frequent occurring way of losing a government job is through death.
Absolutely. So, folks, this is a national sense of urgency because there's a perception across America that we are the major contributors to this challenge. And the USA Today report boldly proclaimed that if you are a government employee, it is more likely that you will die on the job rather than retiring. And the implication is that we are the problem. So the question now becomes, what is it that we should do? So here's what we know. We owe $14 trillion. Our operating deficit for this fiscal year is $1.5 trillion. Next slide, please, Melanie. So think about this. In this hour alone, we're going to borrow $168 million to support the government just in one single hour. Can you imagine that, sir? Just in 1 hour, that's how much our government is going to borrow. And if we look at our nation of 300 million, and we look at all of the families that live in America, and if we divided the debt across the 300 million Americans, each family would owe $125,000. Paige, you owe a lot of money, ma'am. How do you propose to pay your debt? Don't answer. Next slide, please, Melanie. So, have you all seen this Government Accountability Office report from March of 2011? By show of hands, how many? Okay, Marion, could you help your colleagues? What was in this report, ma'am? What did this report say? Yes. So, if we could go back to that slide, please, Mel. Correct. So the title, the next slide, please. I'm sorry. So there you go. So the title of this report, now folks, this is hot off the press, and I apologize that the text is small, but if you're taking notes, This report is from March of 2011, and the report number is GAO. Come on in, sir, because America's angry at you. Okay. Well, don't blame me. America's angry at you and him. So the report is GAO-018SP as in Sierra Papa. So this report from the GAO, could you go back to that slide? It says there are significant opportunities to reduce potential duplication in the government programs, to save tax dollars, and enhance revenue. That's code word for, say it again, Ma'am? Absolutely. So what needs to happen is, folks, we have to do things to help reduce the debt, to help reduce the deficit. I mean, yes, ma'am, please. Yes. Yeah. Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. We need to fire the education department and just get rid of them. We need to get rid of them. Yeah.
There is only so much.
Yes.
8,000 people can do.
Yes.
In terms of the program.
Yes, ma'am.
We don't authorize the programs. We implement the programs.
Yes, ma'am.
In fact, if you did a survey of internal HUD employees, they could actually come up with programs to eliminate. They could come up with programs to eliminate. You're not asked. We do the implementation.
Yes.
Programs are implemented by the Congress.
Yes, ma'am. And here's my response. That is absolutely a compelling and accurate perspective. How many of you all have seen on the trains the phrase, see something, say something? By show of hands, how many folks have seen that? See something, say something. And as Marion has accurately described, you all know more about HUD's operational programs than anyone. Marion, I'll take that, ma'am. Thank you so much. So you all have the opportunity to communicate to our government leaders.
No, that's not true.
Okay.
As a federal employee,
Yes.
our ability to communicate
Yeah.
with the congressional leaders
Yes.
is curtailed. We can do it as a private citizen.
Yes.
You can.
Yes.
But if you're a government employee,
Yeah.
you are discouraged,
Yeah.
sometimes prohibited.
Okay.
Discouraged is
Yes.
a better word.
Yes.
From engaging those congressional leaders who have direct influence on your department's budget.
And I certainly.
So if you don't like your job,
Yeah.
engage in a conversation with the congressmen who give us money.
Yeah.
If you like your job, don't do that.
Right. And I accept that, and I also say that within HUD, there are discretionary spending and discretionary decisions that we do have. Let me offer you just one anecdotal example. I was over in Singapore 2 months ago delivering a seminar, and I received an email from my office at the National Defense University. And the email said, to help reduce the operating cost at the National Defense University, we are looking for people to voluntarily turn in their BlackBerries to reduce the operating cost. And I said, Stan, do you have an absolute requirement to have a BlackBerry? And I said, no, I do not. So I sent my department chair an email saying, I do not have an absolute requirement for my own government-funded BlackBerry, so therefore I volunteer to give my BlackBerry up. Now, that's just one small anecdotal example, but if many of us looked at other opportunities, the small cents that we can save certainly could add up. Now, let's take a look at another example. Okay, Melanie, could we go to the next slide, please?
As soon as I get over there.
Oh, I'm sorry. So there are lots of things that we can do. Now, let me share with you, which is the largest department in the United States government? Which is the largest? By far. And the Defense Department consumes the greatest part of the budget. Could we go to the next slide, please, Melanie? Next slide. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide. Okay, actually, this previous slide. So, the GAO reported across the government in discretionary activities, across our government, there are 34 areas within the government that have similar or overlapping capabilities or that provide the similar services to the same population. We're talking about discretionary actions that are costing American tax dollars, that are contributing to 300 million people, sir, being angry at you. So, the Defense Department is the largest gorilla in the telephone booth. Well, what actually can happen from a leadership perspective? Could we go to the next slide, please, Melanie? So, we have over at the Defense Department recently retired the Honorable Secretary Robert Gates, who served under the previous administration and the current administration. Secretary Gates embraces what the theme of this presentation is, being a transformational leader. And you might be asking, well, exactly what is a transformational leader? A transformational leader is a leader who seeks to execute not just what is best for them, not just what is best for their organization, but what is in the best interest of the enterprise. So Secretary Gates, if we could go to that slide, please, Melanie. Secretary Gates, for the last 6 years, engaged in identifying opportunities where the Department of Defense could save dollars and still maintain its effectiveness and efficiency. Allow me to share with you a couple of examples. We have something within the Defense Department called the United States Joint Forces Command. That's one of our non-combatant commands. They are located in Norfolk, Virginia. After an analysis of those potential redundancies, Secretary Gates says to the President, I believe we should disestablish the Joint Forces Command because they perform some of the activities that are performed by other commands, resulting in unnecessary redundancies. And if we could return to that slide, please, Melanie. So Secretary Gates proposed to President Obama, let's de-establish this command. President Obama in February approved that. Now, can you imagine the folks in Norfolk, Virginia? They are saying, what, are you out of your mind? What do you mean? Disestablishing this Joint Forces Command that employs 9,000 people. What about all these jobs? That certainly is a consideration, but is there a larger picture? Can America save costs by disestablishing redundant capabilities? So as of September the 30th, what we now know as the United States Joint Forces Command will no longer exist, saving a significant amount of dollars. Another example, back to that slide, please. The United States Marine Corps for 15 years had been developing what you see there, an expeditionary fighting vehicle. Its original planned cost was $4.5 billion. Now look at the mathematics. Over 15 years, the $4.5 billion has ballooned to $14 billion. And so the question was recently asked, do the Marines really need this monster? Can we still accomplish the mission of the Marine Corps without this monster? So Secretary Gates, from a transformational leadership perspective, said, what is not just best for the Marine Corps, but what is best for the United States of America? The $14 billion monster, cut, gone. Additionally, many of you are from the Chief Information Officer function within HUD or a related area. Within the DOD, we had what were determined to be unnecessary redundancies within our CIO function. Secretary Gates asked, why do we have all these redundancies and what can we do about it? So even without Congress saying yes or no, Secretary Gates said, I am accountable to do that which is best, not just for the Department of Defense, but what is best for America. So those unnecessary layers that existed within the CIO department, they're gone. Absolutely gone. So Secretary Gates demonstrated the essence of what it means to be a transformational leader. And here's what I would like to share with you all. Being a leader is not based upon your grade. At one time, I was a GS-15 government employee, and I served as a program manager for the Internal Revenue Service. Okay, I did. I served as a program manager then. That's 10 years ago. So 10 years ago, come on down, sir, because America is angry at you, and we want to find out exactly how we can get back at you. There's a seat right here for you, sir. So 10 years ago, you paid... The tax man cometh. So 10 years ago, when I was selected to be a GS-15, someone says to me, oh, Stan, now you are a leader. And I said, really? If I'm a leader now, just because I was selected to be a GS-15, help me to understand, what exactly was it I was when I was a GS-14? Was I not leading then, even if it's leading myself? What was it that I was doing when I was a GS-13? Was I not leading? And my theme to you always, leadership is not about your position. It is not about your grade. It is about the competencies, ma'am, the competencies that you bring to the environment. You can be a GS-7 and be a leader. So let's understand that leadership is not about your grade. It is about your competence. Next slide, please, Melanie. So we talked about this notion of the transformational leader, and I have to share with you due diligence. I am not the original researcher of this concept of the transformational leader. And for your reference, there's a person by the name of Bernard Bass, B-A-S-S. He spent a lot of years researching this concept, and he coined the notion, take care, Mary, and see you later, okay? Okay, thanks. So he termed this notion of the transformational leader. Now, here's the key aspect that I invite you to consider about the transformational leader. It is that leader who seeks to influence followers to transcend their own self-interest. Now, please get this. To transcend their own self-interest for the greater good, rather than focusing on, oh, what's best for Stan, or oh, what's best for my division. even if what's best for my division sub-optimizes what's best for the enterprise. So I would just invite you to focus just for a second on transcending our own self-interest. Now think about the government environment. We are coming up on what's known as the third fiscal quarter of the year. Over at our schoolhouse across the river, right over here, there are folks right now looking at funds that have not been spent for the balance of the year. And guess what they are doing, Terry? They are saying, how can I spend those dollars on what I want? Now, if the dollars were that important, should you not have surfaced that earlier, and that would have been prioritized into a budget decision? But because there is now this pot of money that has been unspent, there are many people over at the National Defense University right now saying, that $8 million, I could use that. They are seeking their own parochial interest as opposed to the greater good. Now, here's what I know to be absolutely true. I know that never happens at HUD. I can tell you that myself. I know with absolute certainty that that never, ever happens at HUD. So we don't have to talk about HUD examples. I'm simply sharing with you Defense Department examples. So think about the Secretary Gates thinking about the greater good for America rather than spending on the Department of Defense. Could we go to the next slide, please, Marion? So who are examples in the private industry of transformational leaders? Sam Walton led Walmart as its CEO for 30 years. He thought about the greater good. And when he started, Sears and Roebuck did not want to do business with him. J.C. Penney's did not want to do business with Walmart. But yet, Walmart now is the largest retail company on the planet, bar none. Walmart exists on 6 continents. And did you hear just a couple days ago, First Lady Michelle Obama is teaming with Walmart now to bring fresh foods to populations that might have been underserved? That's the Walmart vision, thinking about the greater good. Could we return to the next slide? By the way, did you have any questions to this point? No questions? Okay. Can we check online to see if they had questions? Okay. Okay. Did you have any questions? Anyone online? No? Okay, super. Southwest Airlines, another corporation led by a transformational leader. Think about this. 30 years of consecutive profitability. How many of you have heard of Trans World Airlines? Where are they? How many of you have heard of Eastern Airlines? Where are they? How many of you have heard of World Airlines? I know some of you are too young. It's okay, Lauren. You're too young. But because of leadership, folks, it's a leadership culture that embraces focusing on the greater good rather than focusing on our individual and parochial interests. Now, I have been traveling around the country and around the globe for the past 7 years talking about this subject. And frequently I am responded with this: oh, well, Sam Walton, that's great for the private sector. Oh, Herb Kelleher, that's wonderful for the private sector, but that could not possibly happen in the government. What you are saying, Stan, is not a realistic expectation. And I say, really? Could we go to the next slide, please, Melanie? Oh, here are some outcomes from an empirical. Yes, sir.
Stan, I have a question.
Where's that microphone? There you go. Thank you, Lauren.
Combining the earlier question with the self-interest question. So is it your thinking that if I was more like Herb Keller or Sam Walton, if I was part of a program because we do deal with OMB a lot. They do want to know whether our program's real efficient. Congress, you know, since we work for the executive agency, would it be your opinion if we were more like Sam Walton, we would advocate for the destruction of our own jobs and our own program?
Well, here's my question.
Kind of the hope.
Here is, so did everyone hear the question? The question was more, well, if we are advancing that an unnecessary program be eliminated, and if that unnecessary program results in my job being lost, should I not just simply be quiet and keep my job? And here's my response. Does the United States government exist so that you can have a job? Is that the purpose of our government, sir?
It is not.
Is the purpose of the U.S. government to promote a government welfare state for you, sir? Terry, I'm simply asking, do not get angry at me. I'm simply asking questions. So therefore, if we think about the essence of the transformational leader, thinking about the greater good, if eliminating those redundant programs can help our country, then you have to answer that question, sir. I cannot answer the question for you. I can only present to you the alternatives. I can only present to you that we owe China $9 trillion. And the Chinese, they want their money. And if we don't pay them, they're going to own California, they're going to own New York, and they're going to own where you live. So we have some alternatives. What can we do to reduce the deficit? So, sir, I did not give you an answer. I simply shared with you a perspective that hopefully you will take as a call to action. Because what is the saying? See something, say something. So I'm frequently presented with the argument, oh, that's great in the private sector, but that won't work in the government. It could not possibly work in the government. And I say, really? Melanie, please. Next slide, please. Folks, I offer to you a leader within your United States government who for 8 years embraced this concept of the transformational leader, and as a result of that orientation, which is focusing on the greater good, the Honorable Secretary Elaine Chao led the Department of Labor to phenomenal, unprecedented performance outcomes for 8 years. So when I am presented with the argument, oh, that's great pie in the sky, oh, that's wonderful academic theory, oh, but that won't work in the government, I say, really? What if I provided you an example, a recent example? Could we go back to that slide, please, Melanie? So how many of you, by show of hands, are familiar with what's known as the President's Management Agenda? Okay. Most of you are. That was our performance metric for the past 8 years. For 10 of the previous 11 quarterly ratings, there was only one department in our government that earned green in all 5 categories. Only one. The United States Department of Labor, led by Secretary Chao. How many of you all know what it is to have a clean financial opinion? Okay, ma'am, you're up. And your name? Diane. Hey, Diane, I'm Stan. Okay. What does it mean, ma'am, to have a clean financial opinion? No. I'm sorry. Yeah, please.
Violations of the law, and the Inspector General and your auditors say that you got good books.
Which means you can account for every dollar that the Office of Management and Budget has allocated to you. You can account for that. So that's known as an unqualified clean opinion.
Right.
Take a look at that slide, please. For 7 consecutive years, the Department of Labor earned a clean, unqualified financial opinion. Okay, and you say, okay, so what? How many of you all have heard the name before, Malcolm Baldrige? Who knows who Malcolm Baldrige is? And I know the folks at HUD know who Malcolm Baldrige is. I know this. I know the folks at HUD know who Malcolm Baldrige is. I know this to be true. I'm in the wrong HUD? Okay. Well, Malcolm Baldrige is a researcher in performance effectiveness, and what resulted from his research is now known as the Baldrige Award. It's the award for performance effectiveness. And our government has now the Baldrige Award. Melanie, to that slide, please. No, the previous slide. 5 President's Quality Awards. 5. No other department doing the same time earned 2. One of my alma maters is George Mason University out here in Fairfax. George Mason University conducts an annual survey of government performance, and it selects a single government organization each year. If you take a look at that slide, please, Melanie, for 4 consecutive years, unprecedented, guess which government department under Secretary Chao's leadership earned the #1 ranking for government performance? Unprecedented. There's an association called the Association of Government Accountants. They are the folks who count the money. They awarded the Secretary of the Department of Labor 8 awards consecutive for their financial management. Now, Paige, are these things accidental? Terry, are these things simply a coincidence? Are these things simply a happenstance? Or could they possibly be the result of a transformational leadership orientation that empowers people to perform? So, folks, here's what we shared with you in the private sector. Sam Walton, Herb Kelleher. In the public sector, we showed you Secretary Robert Gates. We showed you Secretary Elaine Chao. Next slide, please. Here are some of Secretary Chao's principles, because I was so interested in the outcomes enabled by the Department of Labor. I interviewed the secretary and said, ma'am, what is it that enabled your department to realize these outcomes? You could take a look at those. But I would call your attention to the final bullet, which says, learning to be an effective leader is hard, but achievable. So those of you who did not raise your hands earlier, I say to you, if America's interest is your priority, America needs you to lead. But America needs you to consider becoming a transformational leader. Next slide, please, Melanie. So, I'm an academic, but I also performed as a program manager, I told you, at the Internal Revenue Service. So, are there any engineers in our audience today? Who's a systems engineer? Okay, great. I'm going to put you on the spot. What? Yes, we're going to put you on the spot because you're a HUD. You can do this. You can do this. Okay, so. I'm a civil engineer. You're a civil engineer. Well, that's great. How many folks understand the concept of a logical gate, something called an AND gate? Anyone understands that? There you go, loud and proud in terms they understand.
It's basic logic. If something is true and something is not true, the end is not true. It's logical gates.
And if all the things are true, then
it's true.
So an AND gate says if element A is true and element B is true, and element C is true, then the outcome is also true. However, if element A is true, but element B is not true, even though elements C, D, and E are true, the outcome still will be untrue. So that is called an AND gate. So if we could go back to that slide, please, Melanie. So I tried to craft a model, and this model is known as the Vicki. Is there anyone here whose name is Vicki? Great. So this is the Vicki Transformational Leadership Model. And my research over the past 10 years has informed me that there are 5 things, Paige, 5 things we would like for you to consider to be transformational. You must be visionary. Well, what exactly does that mean? That means if you are in an environment and you see things that need to happen, say something, do something. It was President John F. Kennedy who stood on the steps of Duke University in 1961, and he declared to the globe that America, by the end of the decade, will send a man to the moon and bring him back again safely. That's called a vision. And this week, guess what? We celebrate. What happened in 1969? We had one small step for a man and a giant leap for mankind because of a vision. So we're asking you at HUD, what is your vision for improving performance? See something, say something, do something. Next, same slide, please, Melanie. The next piece is, folks, this is where my anecdotal evidence is saying that we as government servants are struggling. We are struggling with integrity. And there are 300 million Americans. Sir, what is your name in that wonderfully green shirt? What is your name, sir? Sinai. There are 300 million Americans pissed at you because of your supposed integrity, sir. What is it that integrity means? It is doing what we are supposed to do. Every day in the newspaper, there is a government employee who has done something terrible. Now, I know at HUD that doesn't happen. I can tell you that for a fact. I can tell you that, Terry. I know for a fact that does not happen at HUD. That does not happen at the Department of Defense. It's those other people who lack integrity. It's not us. It's always them. But if we are going to be transformational, despite what others might do, we have to do what is in the best interest of America, not what is in my best interest. And if I am asked to make voluntary sacrifices, such as giving up my BlackBerry, take my BlackBerry. I survived before I had a BlackBerry. I believe I can make it without my BlackBerry. That same slide, please. Communication, folks. We must communicate, communicate, communicate. We must communicate if it's just 2 of us. We must communicate in forms like this. I am hoping that after this presentation, some of you will go out and you will share with 3 people, that we have opportunities. Presentations. Now, can someone share with us what is the most compelling form of all communications? What is the most compelling form of communication? Anyone? Say it again. Oral, correct? Right? Yes. Incorrect. What is the most compelling form of communication? Anyone? Say it again. A picture, right, Terry? Incorrect. Help me. What is the most compelling form of all communications? Body language, right, sir? Correct?
I'm not going to answer that.
The most compelling form of communication, folks, is not what you say, but what you do. Your actions, sir. And see, you have those hands folded. I know what that means exactly, but I'm okay with it. Doctor, you okay there? Super. So, folks, it's not what you say that communicates volumes. It's what you do as a leader It's what you do as a leader. And America needs you to lead, not just by words, but by actions. Next, the same slide. Inspired, folks. By show of hands, how many of you today are inspired? Now, don't look at your neighbor and be honest. How many of you today are inspired to do your absolute best for HUD and for America? Raise your hand without looking at anyone else. That's what America needs. Same slide, please, Melanie. Empowerment. Now, there are two dimensions to this. I hope that institutionally HUD is empowering you, but we can't depend upon HUD to empower us, just as we cannot depend upon the Congress to empower us. We must empower ourselves. So the Vicki model, if it could go back, consists of 5 elements. Using that AND gate, if the vision is present, if the integrity that tonight has is present, if we're communicating effectively, if we are inspiring others, if we are empowering others, then we can become transformational leaders, and we can help our nation address this national sense of urgency. Now, here's my question, folks. If you do not act in a transformational leadership perspective, then who will? And if you do not act now, then when will we? And if it's not you, ma'am, then who is it going to be? Because America is depending upon you. And there's not a lot that has to happen to become a transformational leader. Let's look at some strategies. Here's some things that we need you to consider. Challenge the process. You heard Marian Uller. She articulated some very important perspectives. But it is my vision that we examine every single thing that we do and we ask, is this the most effective approach? Is this the most efficient approach? Do we have a culture of challenging the process, or do we say, are you kidding? I'm not going to challenge anything. The last time I was challenged, my performance review was downgraded. Challenge the process. That same slide, please. Inspire a shared vision. Are you talking to yourselves about what can we do within HUD? Inspiring a shared vision. Enabling others. Yes, sir.
Question on the shared vision thing.
Yes, sir.
I become a leader, he becomes a leader, everyone in the room becomes a leader. We all inspire visions, we all set visions. Now we have a room full of visions.
Yes, sir.
How do we get to share? If we're all leaders and there's no followers, there's no execution.
Yes, sir.
Everyone's leading and setting visions.
Yes, sir.
Who's coming behind the vision, doing the work, bringing the visions together and actually making them happen?
There's a concept known as governance. And what is governance? We all recall King Richard and the Round Table of Knights, do we not? So we bring all the leaders together around the round table of decision. And we say, okay, leader A, what's your perspective? My perspective is blah, blah, blah. Leader B, what is your perspective? My perspective is blah, blah, blah. Then we as leaders, we collaborate to say, given all of these perspectives, now what shall we do to protect the kingdom? Not to protect leader A's parochial interest. Although we accept that interest, we say, given all of these interests, how then do we make the best decision to protect the kingdom? So, and here's what is important, folks. If you have a vision, it has to be a vision that is shared by others. It cannot simply be, ma'am, your vision alone that's not shared by others. Because, Paige, if it is your vision alone, ma'am, unshared by others, that vision can easily transform into a nightmare. So the vision of sending a man to the moon and bringing him back again was a visionary. Did the visionary hang around to see that vision realized, sir? No. He did not. But there was a governance process in place. There was a shared vision. Me and my brothers in Alabama, we grew up playing. How many folks know what caps are? You have to be old as I'm going to be 60. Caps are little pop guns that have little splotches of dynamite, and you put them in a gun and you hit it, and it makes a cap sound. My brothers and I, because we were inspired by President Kennedy's vision, we used to scrape the caps off, make a big pile of that, and build our own model rockets and shoot them up because we were inspired. We drank Tang because we were inspired. Yeah, you remember Tang? Absolutely. It was the orange Kool-Aid, but we were inspired by the vision. So it is governance that needs to happen, sir.
But how does that scale to an organization of 10,000 people? Governance works great for 20 people sitting around a room. You can even get about as high if you use Dunbar's number and some of those other theories. You can get 100, 120 people doing that together.
Yes, sir.
You can't have 10,000 leaders.
Really?
Somebody in the 10,000 people has to follow.
So here, that is a very compelling and a valid perspective. And here's my response. 2 minutes until what? We're done. We're done? Okay, great. So here's my response. We have something called the United States government. Can someone share with me what is the ultimate form of governance that governs us all? And it's not just 10,000 of us, but what is that instrument of governance that governs the 300 million of us? The Constitution. So it is absolutely scalable from 2 persons to 300 million to have an agreed upon process to make decisions. And our process across the federal government is called the Constitution. So I say to you, governance is absolutely scalable. But it is those leaders who seek not just what is best for themselves, but what is best for the enterprise. Now, do we live in a perfect environment, ma'am?
Yes.
I know that you do. I believe that you do. I believe that. But in my environment, it is sometimes imperfect. But folks, in closing, here's what's important in closing. If we're going to help America, if we're going to help HUD, if you're going to help your division, I encourage you to think about Bernard Bass's themes of the transformational leader. And I say to you in closing, hopefully this has sparked some interest in you because we owe $14 trillion and we have a $1.5 trillion deficit. And if not you, then who? And if not now, then when? I thank you for allowing me the opportunity to make you angry, and I hope you transform this anger into action. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Stan. I know I have been given a lot of things to think about, and hopefully the same has gone on for you all here. Again, just a bit of administrative. If you haven't signed in the sign-in sheet, please see me before you leave. And look for our next session, August 18th, where we'll be discussing the federal deficit. So I hope to be able to see a lot of you there. Thank you again.